My wife cheated with her boss while I worked double shifts to pay her debts, so I filed divorce and took everything. Now she begs. I'm a 31-year-old man who genuinely believed that working myself to the point of numbness was the purest form of commitment. For most of my life, love equaled sacrifice, and when I married my wife, I thought giving everything I had, time, health, money, was simply what a good husband did. She came into the marriage carrying heavy debt from past job losses and medical bills, and I didn't hesitate for even a second before saying, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." I remember her crying into my chest that night, whispering, "You're the only stable person I've ever had." And I felt something in me harden, a responsibility, a purpose, something I took too seriously for my own good. To cover her debts, I picked up double shifts, night overtime, even holiday hours when everyone else was celebrating with their families. I'd walk into work at sunset and walk out at sunrise, bones aching, eyes burning, but every time I saw her smile and say, "Thank you, babe. You're really my protector," it made the exhaustion feel worth it. There were days I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror, unshaven, hollow-eyed, smelling like chemicals from the factory, but I kept telling myself this was temporary, that she'd rebuild, and we'd enjoy a stable future together. But then she got a new job, and with it came a new boss she seemed strangely attached to. At first, it was innocent enough, stories about his jokes, how supportive he was, how he believed in her potential. I'd tease her lightly, saying, "Sounds like you admire him," and she'd laugh a little too quickly, touching my arm and replying, "Oh, please, stop. It's just professional admiration." But something in her tone never sat right with me. Still, I kept working, kept sacrificing, kept believing. Because I didn't know yet that while I was breaking my back building a future, I was also unknowingly funding the comfort that made her betrayal possible. I started noticing the shift so gradually that at first, I convinced myself it was nothing, just stress, just life, just adulthood tightening its grip. But the truth was quieter, sharper, settling into the small spaces of our marriage like dust you only notice once it coats everything. My wife began coming home later, her explanations always vague. "We're swamped. He needed me to finish reports. It's just one of those weeks." Meanwhile, I was dragging myself through 14-hour shifts, stumbling into a house that suddenly felt colder, emptier, like she had taken something with her every time she left. One night, when I walked in at nearly 3 a.m., I found her awake on the couch, smiling down at her phone in a way I hadn't seen in months. "You're up?" I asked gently, trying not to sound accusatory. She jolted, locked the screen so fast it clicked, then said, "Just watching TikToks. Don't start." Her tone was sharp, defensive, and it hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to ask who she'd really been talking to, but the fear of hearing the wrong answer kept my mouth shut. Over time, these cracks widened. She started dressing differently for work. New outfits, more makeup, perfume that lingered hours after she left. When I'd tease, "Big presentation today?" she'd roll her eyes and respond, "Can't I just want to look good?" There was no warmth in her voice anymore, no softness. She was there, but she wasn't with me. The house that used to feel like our safe place now felt like I was renting space in my own life. Even her hugs changed, lighter, shorter, distracted, like an obligation. The woman who once waited at the door for me to come home barely looked up when I arrived. Still, I kept telling myself I was imagining it. That exhaustion was messing with my mind. That she wouldn't drift away after everything I'd done for us. But deep down, something felt wrong, terribly wrong. And I had no idea the storm I was already walking into. It was her phone that finally made the little hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She used to leave it anywhere, kitchen counter, coffee table, even in the bathroom while showering. But suddenly it became a permanent accessory glued to her hand. If it wasn't in her pocket, it was flipped face down on silent. And whenever it buzzed, she reacted like it was a grenade about to explode, rushing to grab it before I even glanced in its direction. I tried to laugh it off one night, saying, "Damn, are you running the CIA now?" But she shot back with, "You don't respect my privacy," as if I'd asked to read her soul. Then came the early mornings and late nights. She'd leave an hour before work, claiming she needed to prep with her team, even though she used to wake up 10 minutes before leaving. Her return times became unpredictable, sometimes an hour late, sometimes 3. "Traffic," she'd say. Meetings ran over. We had last-minute edits. Every excuse sounded rehearsed, but I kept swallowing the doubt because I didn't want to become the jealous husband stereotype. But the credit card statement was the moment my stomach dropped. Expensive lunches at places she once said were pretentious, drinks charged on weekday evenings, bills for Uber rides that didn't match her work route. I asked lightly, "New lunch spot?" And she barely looked up from her phone as she muttered, "Company stuff." Company stuff that somehow never reflected on her reimbursements. At home, her mood swung from distant to irritated, like my presence annoyed her. She stopped asking about my shifts, stopped checking if I'd eaten, stopped caring about the small rituals that once held us together. Every sign pointed to something I didn't want to face. But I kept telling myself, "You're tired. You're overthinking. You're stressed." I kept pretending nothing was wrong, even as the truth crept closer, waiting for the moment it would explode. The night everything shattered started off painfully ordinary. I came home from another 14-hour shift, smelling like metal and sweat, my muscles screaming as I peeled off my uniform. She was in the shower, humming softly, too calmly, for someone who'd barely spoken to me all week. I tossed my clothes in the hamper and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just breathing, when her phone lit up on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have even glanced, but this time the preview glowed like a knife in the dark. Last night was unbelievable. Same time today. My chest tightened so hard I thought I was having a stroke. It was from a contact saved under a woman's name I'd never seen before, Maya. But no woman texts like that. My hands shook, and I told myself to walk away, to ignore it, to not be that man. But something inside me snapped, the kind of quiet breaking you don't hear until it's too late. Without thinking, I picked up the phone. Her screen unlocked instantly with the fingerprint she didn't realize was still stored from the day she bought it. And everything, every ugly truth she'd hidden, poured out in front of me like a dam collapsing. Months of messages, photos, voice notes, hotel receipts, plans, inside jokes, confessions, cheesy romantic lines, explicit details that made my stomach twist so violently I almost threw up on the floor. The name Maya wasn't a woman at all, it was her boss. He'd saved his number under a fake female contact to avoid suspicion, according to one text. And she'd agreed. One message burned itself into me. I told him we were doing overtime. He's too tired to notice anything anyway. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from something deeper. Betrayal that hollowed out my chest so thoroughly I couldn't breathe. Then, as I scrolled, one final blow hit me. A shared iCloud photo she didn't know was synced. One that proved she wasn't the only married person involved. Her boss had a wife, and she had already suspected something. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at her phone, my hands numb, my heartbeat crashing through my ears. I only snapped back when another notification appeared, this time from an unknown number, a message that read, "If you're seeing this, I think we need to talk." At first, I thought it was some scam or wrong number, but then another text came through with a screenshot of the exact hotel photo I had just seen on my wife's phone. My blood froze. Whoever this was had access to the same cloud folder, meaning they weren't just a stranger. They were someone living in the same nightmare. When I texted back, "Who is this?" the reply hit like another punch to the gut. "I'm his wife." She told me she only figured out I'd seen it because the shared photo showed an extra device viewing it. I felt my throat tighten as she explained she'd been suspicious for months. Late nights, vague explanations, sudden wardrobe changes. It was like hearing my own life narrated back to me by a different voice. She said softly, "I'm so sorry. I hoped I was wrong." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sick that another person was dragged into this disaster. Another innocent spouse carrying the same weight. We talked for almost an hour, exchanging timelines, screenshots, messages, building a puzzle we never wanted to solve. Every piece lined up. Every line matched. Every coincidence turned into proof. And with every new detail she revealed, my disappointment twisted into something sharper, clarity. She said something that stuck with me. "They're so confident because they think we're both too blind to see it." Blind. God, I'd been blind for so long. But that moment, talking to her, felt like a switch flipping inside me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I wasn't drowning. I was planning. I was thinking. I wasn't alone. The anger was still there, burning, but now it had shape, direction. and neither of them had a clue we were finally connecting the dots together. The next morning, I woke up before she did and just watched her breathe, pretending I hadn't seen her entire double life spilling across her phone. She looked peaceful, too peaceful for someone who had spent months lying to my face. I felt something cold settle into me, a kind of emotional numbness that wasn't sadness anymore. It was strategy. I whispered, "I'll make coffee," acting like any other exhausted husband starting another endless shift, and she smiled sleepily, completely unaware that the man standing in front of her was no longer the same. From that moment on, every interaction became an act. I mirrored her routines, her tone, her fake normalcy, while silently documenting everything. Screenshots, saved voice notes, timestamps, bank statements, anything that painted the true picture of our marriage. During lunch breaks, I met with lawyers who looked at my evidence and nodded slowly, one of them saying, "This is more than enough to protect yourself." I learned that because I had paid her debts, covered all household expenses, and worked myself into exhaustion while she built an affair behind my back, the legal advantage leaned heavily toward me. Meanwhile, she kept lying with the confidence of someone who thought she'd never be caught. "Team dinner tonight," she'd say. "Work is crazy these days," she'd sigh. "I'm really proud of myself lately." I'd look at her and respond gently, "I'm proud of you too." And she'd beam, not knowing those words weren't love anymore. They were camouflage. Every new lie made her easier to read. Every excuse sharpened my focus. And every late-night text she tried to hide became another nail in the coffin she didn't even realize she was building. By the end of that week, I had everything: messages, hotel bookings, proof she used my money to see him, and statements showing I carried our entire financial life alone. She thought she was living two lives. What she didn't know was that I had already begun preparing the one that didn't include her at all. I didn't plan to see them together. It just happened. One of those moments life throws at you without warning, like it wants to rip off every layer of denial you've been hiding under. I had finished an overtime shift early and decided to grab a late dinner before heading home. As I passed by a hotel entrance, I heard a laugh, her laugh. Not the tired, distant one she gave me lately, but the light, playful laugh she used to save only for me. I turned, and there they were, my wife and her boss, walking shoulder to shoulder, his hand brushing against her lower back like he owned her. My legs felt like they rooted into the pavement. I didn't move, I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just watched as she leaned into him, whispering something that made him grin smugly. They didn't even look around. They didn't have to. They were too comfortable, too sure I was home working, too certain I'd never see the truth bleeding out in front of me. When I finally stepped toward them, he noticed me first. His eyes widened for a split second before he smirked. Actually smirked, like I was a joke interrupting his evening. I said quietly, "You two look comfortable," and my wife's face drained of color. "It's not what it looks like," she stuttered, gripping her purse. Her boss laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Come on, man. Don't embarrass yourself." That sentence broke something in me. Not her betrayal, not the lies, not the months of double shifts, but him, looking at me like I was insignificant. I drove home in silence, my hands shaking so hard I had to pull over twice. When I walked through the front door later, she followed me in 10 minutes after, pretending like nothing happened. She didn't apologize, didn't explain. She just said, "I need space for a while." Space. After everything I gave, everything I sacrificed. That night, lying in the dark, I hit the lowest point I've ever reached, emotionally hollow, mentally shattered, and unsure how I'd ever rebuild myself from this. But even rock bottom can become a foundation. I just didn't know yet what I was about to build. The morning after everything collapsed, something in me shifted, quietly, almost eerily. I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't demand answers that I already had in my hands. Instead, I woke up, showered, made breakfast, and acted like any other man trying to survive another exhausting workday. She watched me cautiously, maybe expecting a confrontation, maybe expecting tears, but I gave her nothing. And that nothing terrified her more than any fight could have. I realized silence was my power. Silence meant planning. Silence meant she no longer had access to the emotional version of me she had manipulated for years. While she scrolled on her phone pretending to text coworkers, I sat at the dining table transferring my savings into a separate account. Every transaction I redirected, every automatic payment I canceled, Every credit card I moved into my name only. It all happened with a calmness I didn't know I could possess. At lunch, I met my lawyer again. He looked over the updated evidence, screenshots, messages, hotel confirmations, bank statements showing I paid every bill, and said, "You're doing everything right. Play it cool. Don't alert her." His words settled into me like armor. I realized this wasn't just about leaving her. It was about reclaiming the life I had handed away piece by piece while she built a fantasy with someone else. Back at home, she tried to be sweet again. "How was your day?" she asked softly. "Long," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We should plan a weekend together soon," she said, eyes too hopeful, too forced. "Sure," I murmured, knowing exactly which weekend she had already planned with him. Every lie she told became easier to clock. Every excuse, every fabricated meeting, every overly rehearsed explanation. It all folded into the strategy one was building quietly. Meanwhile, her boss's wife kept sending me new screenshots, each one more damning than the last, each one tightening the trap they didn't realize they were walking into. I wasn't healing. I wasn't forgiving. I was preparing. And she had no idea her comfortable little world was about to collapse the same way she collapsed mine. The day everything unraveled for her didn't start with screaming or accusations. It started with a knock on the glass walls of her office conference room. I wasn't there to see it myself, but the HR rep who later emailed me described every detail with almost clinical precision. My lawyer had arranged for the divorce papers to be served at work. During a full staff meeting, her boss insisted she attend. She walked in smiling, holding her latte, completely unaware that the life she built on lies was seconds from imploding. And then the server stepped inside, called her name, and handed her the envelope with my signature on it. HR told me she went pale instantly, her hands shaking as she opened it. The top page wasn't the divorce notice. It was a printed stack of screenshots, messages, photos, hotel bookings, everything she believed she'd hidden. Someone in the room gasped. Someone else whispered her boss's name. And when HR asked him to step out for a private conversation, he panicked, stumbling over his words as she stared at him with horror. He tried denying everything, until the screenshots with his face showed up on the projector. When she called me, her voice trembling, frantic, I picked up calmly. "Why would you embarrass me like this?" she cried. "You embarrassed yourself," I said quietly. "I just stopped covering for you. That wasn't fair. Neither was what you did." She begged to talk in person, but I told her I'd already moved to my brother's place temporarily. She asked if I hated her. I didn't answer. Silence was enough. Later that evening, the HR representative emailed me again. Her boss had been suspended pending investigation. His wife had forwarded everything to the company. Policies were violated. Reputations were tainted. Careers were burning. And all my wife could do was watch the fire she started finally reach her. But she still hadn't faced the part that hurt the most. The part where she realized what the divorce terms meant for her future. When the initial shock wore off, reality hit her harder than any confrontation ever could. The divorce terms weren't just papers. They were a mirror reflecting every choice she'd made while I was breaking myself to carry our life. My lawyer laid everything out with mathematical precision. I had proof I'd paid her debts, proof I'd funded our entire household, proof she'd used my money to cheat, and proof of emotional abandonment. Because of that, the court granted me the house, the car, and full financial separation. She was left with the remainder of her loans and no grounds to claim spousal support. And when she read that section, her hands visibly trembled. What do you mean I have to take this on alone?" she whispered during our mediation meeting. My lawyer answered calmly. "It's what you brought into the marriage, and what you chose to create during it." She turned to me, eyes desperate. "You can't do this to me." I met her gaze evenly. "You already did." Her boss didn't stand by her either, because of course he didn't. HR launched a full investigation, and his wife's evidence was enough to corner him completely. He stopped answering her texts. He told her to lay low. He even blocked her number once the suspension turned into a demotion. I heard all of this from his wife, who kept me updated with a tone that carried equal parts sadness and grim justice. My wife had to move out of our home within 30 days. Watching her pack was surreal, not satisfying, not triumphant, just final. She walked around the living room touching the furniture I worked overtime to afford, whispering, "I never thought it would end like this." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Within a week, she was in a tiny rented apartment she could barely afford, asking friends for help, scrambling to pick up extra shifts, drowning in the financial weight she once placed entirely on my shoulders. But even then, she didn't understand the full cost of what she'd done. Not yet. That part was still coming. It didn't take long for her desperation to show. People think consequences sink in instantly, but they don't. They creep in slowly, like water rising around your ankles until suddenly you're drowning. A week after she moved out, she showed up outside my workplace, eyes red, hair unbrushed, pacing like she'd rehearsed a speech 100 times and forgotten all of it. When I stepped outside, she rushed toward me, whispering, "Please, just listen." Her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in years, not from stress or manipulation, but from panic. The panic of someone realizing the safety net she once mocked is gone for good. We sat on a bench near the parking lot, the cold air biting through my shirt as she cried into her hands. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "I was lonely. You were always working." He said things I needed to hear. I let her talk, because silence hurts more than interruption. She kept going. "He pressured me. He manipulated me. I didn't know how to stop it." I finally answered, my voice steady. "You knew how to lie to me every day? That seems like a choice." She wiped her face aggressively, almost angry at my calmness. "We can fix this," she insisted. "Therapy. Counseling. I'll cut all contact with him. I'll get a second job. I'll repay everything. Just don't let this be the end." I stared at her long enough for her voice to fade. She searched my face for any softness, any flicker of the old version of me, the one who bent, forgave, and carried everything. But that man was gone. "You didn't just break the marriage," I said quietly. "You broke the person holding it together." For a moment, the world went completely still. Her denial cracked, and what spilled out wasn't anger or excuses, it was pure fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of loneliness. Fear of finally facing herself. But even then, she still hadn't reached the part where she'd truly understand what losing me meant. That reckoning was waiting just ahead. The day I finally felt peace wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with revenge, shouting, or some grand final confrontation. It happened quietly. On a morning when I woke up in my brother's spare room, sunlight slipping through cheap curtains, and for the first time in years my chest didn't feel heavy. No alarms blaring for another double shift. No tense silence waiting at home. No wondering what lie I'd be fed that night. Just stillness. A stillness I didn't realize I'd been starving for. I rebuilt myself piece by piece, starting with the things I'd abandoned long before the betrayal. I went back to the gym. I cooked real meals instead of living on vending machine food. I slept without waking every hour. My lawyer finalized the divorce within weeks, and suddenly the house, the car, the money I earned, they were mine again. Not shared, not drained, not weaponized against me. Mine. She tried reaching out again. New numbers, fake accounts, blocked emails. "It's killing me that you won't talk," one message said. "I messed up one part of our life," another read, "but you're throwing everything away." I didn't reply to any of them. Healing sometimes looks like silence, and silence can be louder than any argument. Her boss's wife later updated me. He lost more than his reputation. HR finished their investigation, and the company let him go. Their marriage didn't survive it either. Two people who built a fantasy together now stood in the ruins of their own making. As for my ex, I heard she was struggling, moving from place to place, juggling 2 jobs, drowning in the debts she once escaped by attaching herself to me. Not because I wished suffering on her, but because consequences are not cruelty. They are clarity. Now, when I sit in my quiet home, breathing air that doesn't taste like betrayal, I feel something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Real freedom. I'm rebuilding a life defined by stability, honesty, and peace. A life she can no longer touch. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I'm grateful it did.